I can visualize what curiosity looks for me. My job is literally to be curious. I'm Keaton Fletcher, an associate professor of industrial organizational psychology at Colorado State University.
And I'm Mariana Arvon, an organizational psychologist who specializes in organization and talent development.
And this is Healthy Work. All right, welcome back to another episode of Healthy Work. I am so excited to be joined by today's guest. I will get out of the way and let you introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Phoenix Van Wagoner, and I am an assistant professor of management at California State University, Fullerton. My research really focuses on three areas. One is mental health in the workplace. I also do research on leadership and diversity. And then finally, technology. Really, my focus is on understanding how marginalized employees and diverse employees, how their experiences are lived in the workplace.
And that is such an important topic. I really appreciate your whole body of research. I'm excited to have you here today to talk about a recent paper that you published on the role of curiosity in the workplace and mental health. Would you mind telling our listeners what it is that you did, what you found? Just give us that general overview.
Yeah, absolutely. We were really starting from a place of we wanted to understand the symptoms of anxiety and depression that employees can experience while on the job doing their work tasks. And we wanted to know how these symptoms might vary within the workday and over work weeks. And so we actually asked employees to complete surveys 3 times a day where they actually told us what they were doing at work, how they were feeling, what symptoms of anxiety and depression they might have been experiencing in the moment, what curiosity and interest they might have been experiencing, and finally, some other stuff about performance, whether they felt like they were making progress on their work goals, whether they were feeling satisfied on their jobs, so on and so forth. In line with previous research, we know that some people are more likely to experience symptoms of anxiety or depression than others. And even more importantly, we saw that those who were most likely to experience anxiety or depression, they did at work. And this had ripple effects into their engagement and their job satisfaction. But what was really exciting for us is we wanted to understand some of the mitigating factors that employees might experience naturally on the job that could reduce their symptoms. And we found that curiosity was the key. So when employees actually experienced curiosity while doing their work tasks, which we measured as curiosity as a state of interest, we actually saw that they experienced significantly reduced symptoms of anxiety and depression. And what was most exciting to me about this finding is that beneficial effect of curiosity, it was most important for employees that are most likely to experience anxiety or depression in the first place, those with high trait anxiety or high trait depression. So curiosity was good overall, no matter what, but it actually had a greater beneficial effect for some employees and in exactly the way we would hope to see.
As an anxious boy myself, this makes me so excited. Absolutely makes sense that, someone who's more likely to be anxious is bringing that anxiety to the workplace. But then to hear that particularly for the people who are likely to experience these symptoms anyways, that they're the ones that benefit the most from feeling curious and interested in the moment at work is really exciting, because I feel like a lot of the times our research and our interventions find that, the rich get richer effects of like the people who are already doing well, this thing helps them do even better. And people who aren't doing well, it doesn't do much for them. And so anytime that there's an opportunity to find some sort of experience that helps the people who like really need it, I'm particularly excited, especially when I'm one of those people. And I'm just kind of curious, when you think about curiosity and interest in the moment, what does that look like? Because I could imagine, a wide range of experiences, but just in your experience and as you're writing about this and thinking about this, what does it look like to you?
For me, I think that, curiosity can be a number of things. Interest can be a number of things. For me, what I see is really finding your work tasks engaging and being able to learn something on the way. I'm an academic. I love to learn things, right? That's my whole life. So for me, interest is really about learning. And I know that's not for everybody, but having the opportunity in my normal day-to-day work tasks where I can actually find something that really kind of pulls at my interest, it can really alleviate, because I'm anxious as well. It can really alleviate those symptoms I'm feeling and just pull me through them.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. I think a little bit too of my kids, right? I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they find the most random things so interesting, and they just get curious about everything. And like, also as an academic, I can visualize what curiosity looks for me. My job is literally to be curious, but to like bring a little bit of that like childlike wonder into the moment, I think could be really helpful. And I would imagine that it's going to have a wide range of effects. Something that sticks out to me is that curiosity, certainly the way that like we're talking about it right now, feels very present focused. Like if I'm curious about this thing going on, that's where my attention is. It's in the moment. It's in this experience. And anxiety feels very forward facing, and depression feels like very, rear facing. And so I wonder, if there's that grounding experience that brings it to it. I'm just curious about that for a future study. While you were doing this, did anything like stand out and surprise you?
Yes. There are a couple of things that really surprised me. There are two things. So one of them, the first one, is that when I was looking through the data, we used a measure of anxiety and a measure of depression that clinicians use that can actually look at thresholds, clinical thresholds, where if you are above this threshold, it may support in a diagnosis. It's not a diagnosis whatsoever, but the thresholds are relevant. And what I found was that, and this is not just to this study in this paper, but across all of my other studies in this area, that a significant number of employees are experiencing levels of anxiety in particular, but also depression that are above these thresholds, and some of them severely so. And that the percentage in some of my studies is as high as 60% of employees. And so that's something that the variance there is really important. I think that we need to just talk about this and recognize that people while at work are experiencing high levels of symptoms that can impact their lives. That's really kind of the first thing that jumped out to me. The second is that you mentioned depression is kind of backward looking, and I absolutely agree. I love that kind of description of depression. But one of the symptoms of being in a depressive episode is a lack of interest or a lack of pleasure in doing things, especially things that you used to enjoy. And so I found it really fascinating and really interesting that employees who were reporting in our pretest that they do experience symptoms of depression at relatively high levels, they still experienced interest throughout their workday, and it was still having effects on other symptoms as well. So that was something that was really, really fascinating to me and something I want to explore more.
There's so many cool things in what you just said where, yeah, I guess if you're thinking about depression, right, and that anhedonia, lack of interest, is inherently part of this definition, you would expect there to be like not enough variance on curiosity in people who are really high on this, but it sounds like that's not necessarily the case. And I think that there's, yeah, like you said, a lot of work to be done and a lot of interesting questions to ask and potential points of intervention for people who are experiencing these symptoms. And my mind is still blown about that 60% number that you are referencing across your different research of people who are above the threshold for, anxiety or depression in some of these measures. Certainly, as you mentioned, not a diagnostic criterion of itself, but like certainly that the thing that should get you in the door to someone to pursue that. And when I teach undergrad, usually the numbers that we talk about are like 1 in 4 people maybe will experience some sort of mental health issue in any given year, and basically 1/2 people experience it in the course of their lifetime. But these numbers blow those out of the water, and I think really reflect what we're hearing in the general discourse of the mental health crisis, that everyone's very anxious, that we are anxious right now. And it's, I think, a much bigger problem than, you or my studies can address. But I really appreciate you biting off a piece of that apple and trying to understand what are some things we can do. And yeah, I just find it surprising how high that number is, much higher than the way we talk about it in the classroom. as a manager or a worker, what can I do with your study? How do I actually like take this and hopefully alleviate some of my anxiety?
Well, I think something that's very practical in this is certainly there are going to be elements of work and the way we design work that are boring and monotonous. There are tasks we have to do that are that. However, we can actually build in points during our day or in our meetings where we actually spark a little bit of this curiosity, this childlike wonder. We just have to be intentional about it. And it may have ripple effects that we don't see in the moment. So anything from kind of a leader having sort of games in their meetings to actually assigning people tasks that they find intrinsically interesting, that could have a positive effect. And often we don't think about this in work design, in assigning tasks. We're very focused on task progress and getting it done. And we don't think about kind of the curiosity element of this. And I think that's an area where a little bit of effort could go a long way.
I love that, especially thinking, obviously one of my most direct experiences is in the classroom with students, and you would hope that that would be a place where you're curious, right? But I think our structures are such that they don't necessarily reward curiosity. They reward performance, as you're pointing out. And same thing in the workplace. And that's antithetical to your health and well-being. It can make you feel, I'd imagine, like you can't enjoy what it is that you're doing, or you're not supposed to enjoy it. But so much of what we do is or could be enjoyable. Even some of these monotonous tasks, if we were encouraged or allowed ourselves to be curious about some aspect of it. And I just find that like a really nice perspective shift of how do we encourage curiosity from a systems level perspective, or taking a beat out of being so performance oriented to remember to be curious, to remember that like learning itself is rewarding and like interest is inherently interesting. And so, yeah, what a really cool point in perspective. Thank you for bringing that. My favorite question to ask is, why do you do this work? And, that can be this work specifically about this paper or just generally, why do you do what you do?
I love that question. So one of the things that I love to do, I give talks on mental health all the time to executives, to students around the world. And I always start these talks by showing a picture of a brain and a heart kind of connected, not the beating heart, kind of the symbolic heart on the screen. And I take a moment to talk about the fact that I myself live with a diagnosis for generalized anxiety disorder, as well as major depressive disorder. And this really kind of hit for me, not my first, but maybe my most severe depressive episode really emerged for me my senior year in college. And I was one of those where I really didn't want to think about my future. I was afraid. I was on social media seeing all of my friends who they seemed to have successful lives, jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't, and I was terrified. And I ended up not leaving my apartment for 3 weeks. And it was one of my management professors who actually sent me an email telling me that they were worried about me. They hadn't seen me in a month and that they were coming to my apartment. And I ended up actually going to meet this professor at a coffee shop, and we started a conversation that actually got me into research. He invited me to work on some projects with him, and he changed my life. And I discovered that we don't talk about mental health challenges in the workplace in the way that we should. And so I actually went and got my PhD to explore this, to explore these types of experiences that might be on the margin and that we don't talk about enough, especially not with acceptance or positivity, even though they are so normal. One of the things I like to say in my talks is that the number that you said, like 1 in 4 or even 1 in 5 people might experience anxiety or depression this year. If you do the math, that's 1.5 billion human beings this year. If you are just looking at employed people, that's almost 1 billion employees are going to experience anxiety or depression this year in a way that is impacting their lives. And when you hear those numbers, they're hard to fathom, but it also makes it feel more normal. And it opens up the door to conversation, particularly in business contexts, right? I'm in a business school. I work with executives and leaders who have often a difficult time talking about these vulnerable topics. When you lead with that, it really changes things. So I guess to answer your question, starting from a very personal place, this was important. When I actually started looking into the research, we have a ton of theories on emotion and management. We have theories on diversity. We have theories that talk about disability, but we don't do the best job about talking about mental health. We do have theories on stress, right? But when it comes to mental health challenges specifically, we don't have the language and we don't do a good job. So that's one of the reasons and the driving reason that I really got into this research.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I hope to have that level of impact as a professor on students one day. And I think that your vulnerability and willingness to share your experiences and then to engage in the science to better understand those experiences. I'm just so glad you're in the field and doing the research that you do, because we need more people with this orientation and perspective. So thank you, and thank you for your time. I will talk to you later.
Thank you.
Healthy Work is a podcast written and executive produced by Keaton Fletcher and Mariana Arvon. This episode is produced, mixed, and edited by Keaton Fletcher. Artwork is by Keaton Fletcher, and our music is Zero, Microsong by Steve Combs. Please like us, follow us, and subscribe on whatever podcasting software you use, and please leave a review on the iTunes Store. It really does help get us out there.